Passion Harvest. It makes me so happy. Hello, hello, passionate listeners. Welcome to Passion Harvest. Thank you for being here wherever you are in the world. I am Louisa, your host, International Passion Ambassador. And if you like this episode, please do subscribe. I have a very exciting guest today. His name is Ishtar Howell. A traumatic accident changed Ishtar's life dramatically. His mother passed in the accident. Ishtar had a near-death experience and a profound moment of awakening occurred. Ishtar describes his near-death experience as all of my fears and tensions vanished in a sudden instant, and a sublime peace washed over me. I was everything and nothing, and completely at peace. To my surprise, this experience of the sublime inner peace lasted for the next several months, even as I experienced all of the various thoughts and emotions of immense grief. As the peace faded out of my experience, it was replaced again with the unexpected miasma of countless thoughts, fears, and suffering, finding my way back to that experience of boundless consciousness slowly, but surely became the principal desire of my heart. From an early age, Ishtar was interested in mystical and esoteric subjects. Ishtar practices a meditation philosophy known as Ashire's Ascension, which has brought him tremendous inner transformation. In addition to meditation teaching, Ishtar also works as an intuitive astrologer. This is his story, and this is his passion. Ishtar, welcome to Passion Harvest.
Oh, thank you very much, Louisa. That was a lovely introduction too.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Glad you enjoyed it. So, well, look, thank you so much for being here. I'd love to discuss, let's dive right into your near-death experience if you're comfortable talking about that.
Mhm.
I know you spoke before the show about the profound changes afterwards, but a little bit of background for the audience if you're comfortable with that.
Absolutely. And um, feel free to stop me whenever you
No,
need to. Um,
I'll let you go for it. You got center stage.
okay. All right. Well, with 2020 hindsight or the context of looking back on my whole life, um, the NDE and everything that happened in some ways wasn't really all that surprising, which is part of it. I had a lot of um, interesting sorts of, I suppose, spiritual or even kind of strange paranormal experiences as a kid, which more or less I was interested in, but I kind of put on the back burner because I
Right.
was at about age 6 or 7. I was trying to get on the track and be part of whatever society I was born into, and so from about 6 to age 13, I was I think in some ways fairly conventional in a lot of ways in some of my goals. Um, and then it was the second to last day before the end of the school year. Um, I had actually broken my arm uh, playing baseball, getting hit by a pitch, and I remember that night, June 5th. That was my big complaint. Like, oh, woe is me! I'm gonna, miss half a baseball
Oh,
the summer
you've
season or something
broken
like
on,
that.
yeah.
And I was talking to my mom that night, as I often did, kind of winding down, getting ready to go off to sleep. And one of these sort of precognitive flashes, which were not unusual in childhood. They had a particular sort of feel that was different than other things when they came through me. It just came into me and then out my mouth without any kind of volition on my part. And I asked my mother, are you going to die soon, Mom? And it surprised me,
You didn't know where it came
saying those
from.
words. Well, I kind of knew, but I had no control. It was, just
Okay.
ultimate improv, I suppose. No mind filter or anything. Just the words coming out of my mouth, and it had that sense of those precognitive flashes I would get.
Right.
Only they weren't really ever about anything so major as that. They
Hmm.
were more about you're going to win this raffle, or you're gonna, meet some person, and sometimes I daydream the conversations, but this was quite different, of course. And so she was a little bit um, affected by it, which was odd. I'd never had any kind of fear about that around my mother at all. If I had worries, they were more about my dad. But my mom, I figured, oh, she's quite healthy
Yeah.
in many ways. And so then she said, well, not for a while. I promise I'll be around for you as long as you need me. And then I felt quite reassured, and I kind of shrugged it off, and went to bed. And then hours, I suppose 8 hours later, I woke up with a complete start, like cartoon characters, I suppose, do when they just sort of
Jump out of bed or
flip right out of bed. Yeah, yeah. And it was as if it felt as if I just had sort of ran into my body, and with the force of running into it, pushed it. And as I did that, my mom and dad were right outside my bedroom door. And I didn't sleep with my door closed. That was another thing. And so they were walking by, and I just said, I got something I have to tell you, and I got something really important I have to tell you. And then I couldn't remember it, and I was so frustrated that I couldn't. It was as if I had a scroll in my back pocket and it fell out when I was running, and they had to call me down for about 3 to 5 minutes or so, and then I shrugged that off and went to school, and had a regular school day, one of the a happy school day when the year's about to end for a kid, and came home, and we had a few hours together watching a movie. Drove my sister off to her new job, and then we were about to actually drive to the hospital to see about getting a cast on my arm. And as we turned out of the entrance to the parking lot over crossing a divided highway, somebody who we couldn't see, who was behind another car, I think they just decided to go really, really fast, and then they ended up hitting us. And it was in that moment I was about to talk to my mom, turning my head to the left from the passenger seat, and just as I turned, good Lord, there was a big Lincoln Town Car type car that was just about to hit us,
wow.
and I was in that moment I was pretty certain that my life was shortly coming to an end, that the jig was up. It was a pretty deep certainty. And instead of
What do you
tightening
do?
up, or fear didn't come, and it had nothing to do with anything, but just
It
instead of
just
becoming
was.
afraid, it was just total acceptance. And there was no fear. And I felt myself basically sinking into this excuse me, this profound relaxation. And I had one thought before I really went into this sort of relaxation, which was almost kind of a funny thought. That I thought, oh, I really thought this one was going to go more than 13 years. I really,
Right.
kind of like that.
As in your life.
Sure, as in my life, and it was read from a place of almost this multi-lifetime perspective. That was I kind of caught that I was drifting from sort of being little Thomas Howell, who had these fears and likes and dislikes, and kind of here to kind of stepping back into this much larger perspective. And as right after saying that, I had the whole my whole life flash before my eyes from that moment backward, all the way. Like it really was like a reel of film, basically, and we were going in one reel at a time. And I say we, that might not necessarily really be correct, but in that process it wasn't just my life flashing before my eyes neutrally. There was as if I was connected to some sort of totally, completely objective aspect of consciousness that I had known in my life, but I had often, especially in the last 6 years of ego development, not necessarily always wanted to hear from, because it was, I think, very big and intimidating, and even a little. And I would, of course, it would sometimes poo-poo some of my, silly egoic desires, and I'd be like, "Oh, shut up, go away."
Right.
But here I was completely embracing it and embraced by it. And so as we went through each film, it was almost like I was seeing, okay, there's Oh yeah, there's some regret there, so let that go. There's a grudge there. Why hold on to that? Let that go. There's let's see how we acted in fear there, and with each corresponding thing that I saw, I could even feel, something corresponding in part of my body, some kind of tension or tightening, which I had
How
just become so
interesting.
accustomed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I had, and so there was a wonderful lightening of weights that I was completely unconscious of at that time, and that it felt as if I had this kind of snakeskin, for lack of a better word, um, pulled off my body that I had no idea that I was wearing, for all those years. And I had no idea how afraid I was. That actually struck me as I even had a thought like, wow, I'm only 13, but look at all this fear. I'm 13 with a fairly easy life on the scale of things, but look at that weight. And so it was kind of pulled off. And as we went back through that reel, uh, which was also interesting too, is that I was experiencing things maybe at 100% in those memories, and I could see that you only experienced about 20% of that moment. Those were some of the things. It's like, oh, look at all you were blind to in that
Right.
moment. Look at that. And so that was, there were many little tiny, I suppose, sort of teaching experiences that were delivered in that very compressed um, period of
Moments.
time, that moment. And so at the end of it, there was a sense of um, complete ease, complete. And I'd never been so alive in my life. And I was very, I suppose, non-local. I wouldn't have known that word back then,
Mhm.
but there was a sense of, being totally in my body, but also in the car and also in the sky outside, and everywhere in my visual field, I had a sense that was essentially me. I was the whole thing. I wouldn't have used the word me because at that time the word me really meant that, the little narrator
The
behind
little
the head. But
boy.
there was a
Yeah.
sense of, yeah, there's a sense of being the totality, and total complete peace, and a sense of basically that everything had been the whole time made up of love, or something just as fundamental that I didn't have a word for. That my whole life had been this beautiful, perfect play, even when I was getting sort of beat up. That was one of the scenes I remembered being a kid and being, kind of losing a sort of a 1-on-4 fight, and kind of being thrown against a fence, and having a terrible time in the moment. And one of those things that caused, me to maladapt with some sort of egoic conditioning. But watching it from the scene, I was totally connected with this part of myself that was kind of rooting it on, saying like, yeah, he needs this. We gotta, yeah, this
Really.
is good. This, because
Almost like you
there are all
chose that
these,
suffering.
yeah. I was with this part. It's like, wow, that was unexpected. That was, and I totally embrace that. I was jacked into that greater consciousness. Like, yeah, this needs to happen. And I would see these like lines of, I don't know, I'll call them equations that might bastardize them a little bit or shortchange them, but these kind of equations of time and space. And I would see these ripples that were coming off of different events in my life in this kind of multi-dimensional holographic sort of way. And I would see these ripples connecting with the other people's ripples and forming this kind of beautiful multi-dimensional tapestry. So that was, another aspect of that compressed
So
vision.
interesting. It's often described as like watching a movie. Um,
Yeah,
it sounds like you were detached from the boy that you were in your larger
yeah.
consciousness.
Yeah. And really, it's that larger consciousness had been knocking at my door, and was the whole time, and it was there a lot more up until about age 6. There was a sense of that, but I remember at age, even in kindergarten, I hadn't kind of bought into, I suppose, the little observer ego centeredness. I remember people talking about me, And it seemed like to me, it felt like they're talking about a third person here. Who's that? Oh, no, this is what, okay, got it. Like when I remember the kindergarten teacher telling my mother, oh, he's got a great personality. And I had no idea what they're talking about. And I'm asking my mother afterwards at some point, that word stuck in my mind. What's a personality? And she started describing it. And then when she did, I thought, oh, I should get myself one of those.
That's so fun. God, you've got a good memory. I got the worst memory in the world. I don't remember kindergarten or very, very little pieces of my younger life, but that's just me.
Yeah, I don't know. They stuck around. I remember I have a lot of memories before I could talk, and before I could walk, and being in the crib and being carried around, and
Wow.
the smell of my grandpa's aftershave, which I wasn't. I didn't like it, nor his scratchiness,
Itch.
but I liked
Yeah.
him. I just thought, just maybe put me back to my mother
That's
for the time
amazing.
being. Yeah, yeah.
So, and then what happened? You came back into
Mm.
your physical body at some point. Obviously, I'm here talking to you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I didn't flatline. I never counted it as an NDE. It was weird. I remember the feeling of my head's impact against the car window,
Hmm.
and the feeling of the forces moving my body like a rag doll. And I'm fairly certain that I survived with as little injury as I did because I was so loose, because I was made so relaxed that impact I didn't even aggravate my broken arm.
Mm.
Um, I um, I had no injuries except breaking my middle finger of my right hand, and so that was weird to have that because our car was pretty fairly totaled and we were really moved a long way from where we were hit. You could see the skid marks for years on the highway. And so I came back to, and they pulled us out and took us into the ambulance on the stretchers. And we were being very careful about my neck because they figured I might have some spinal injuries or something like that. And I remember, having my mother call out to me a couple times, and I both times I said, "I'm okay, Mom," and the
Yeah.
second time she registered it, and she left. She kind of went. Her breathing changed from a labored breath to a very even sort of almost, in retrospect, letting the body count down and just sort of stopping. And I, didn't know at the time that what I felt was my mother's, consciousness kind of flowing out. I kind of, when she was calling to me, I also had the sense that we were sort of in the same consciousness in a certain way. There was a sense that there wasn't an external internal divide for me, or a subject object divide was not particularly strong. There I was kind of looking down at my body and looking up at the same
Interesting.
time, looking down from the roof of the ambulance. I could sort of feel my mom, I guess, next to me. Um, uh, you know, and then she kind of went off, and we got to the hospital, and they're working on her behind the curtains over there, and they'd already ascertained that I was mainly okay. So I'm still on the stretcher with my neck, down
Yeah.
to the, tied down, and then we find out that she didn't make it,
Oh, I'm sorry
and
for your suffering.
well, everybody, yeah, I was glad to have a good run of it, and I was glad to have a good 13 years with my mother, because that was a very important connection, and
Yeah.
more than just biological. It was a soul connection, and so then it went that that consciousness that I had been sort of pushed into in the accident sort of stayed with me, and for some time, which at first I thought it was shock, but I wasn't. I started to exhibit. I'd looked through some of my mother's books too. She would sort of she'd gotten a master's in. I think it was marriage and family counseling was the
Right.
particular degree, and so she had introduced a lot of psychological concepts into our house for the past 7, 8 years or so, And I think I was trying to read about shock, and there was an Elizabeth Kubler-Ross book on her office bookshelf. So I was looking at the grieving process, and I was finding, I'm right in line with the grieving process here, as this lady's talking about. But boy, some of these things, these are a little bit beyond shock, because there was this joy, and there was this quietness in there. There was this vastness that was seemingly inside, and all I had, and it didn't go anywhere. And I couldn't lie for the life of me. And at that point, I think I'd become a pretty good liar, actually, for the purposes of being liked by people and, wanting to be accepted. But I just couldn't do it anymore. And I didn't care at all. And it was so liberating not to be afraid of anything. And I wasn't afraid of death anymore. And so, like a lot of people, doesn't have to be a fancy experience or anything. I got to experience life in technicolor rawness for quite some time. Only with me, there was also this vast quietude and silence, which when I would let myself go deeper into it, there would be this often this requisite sort of moving of this subtle energy up my spine,
like a
top of
kundalini.
my head. Yeah, like that. The prana was flowing. The kundalini was probably flowing some too.
Yeah, it's almost like a euphoric,
later.
blissful state, which can occur after near-death experiences. It's quite a common experience.
Indeed.
Or profound feelings of love. People talk of that, but at the same time, you're dealing with the grief or the death of your mother.
Yeah.
How did those two balance?
God. Well, it was weird. Of course, I've always liked weird, and so I got to be my own
this show's kind of weird.
Yeah. I mean, the experience was. I'm lucky that I was pretty fluid and flexible. I didn't put up walls. I just let whatever experiences that are cohabitating be like that. But there would be this, of course, anger and sadness and bargaining with trying to bargain with a higher power. Just I'll do this and just put things back. I'll wake up and I won't even remember this conversation happened. How about that? And stuff like that. But at the same time that I would feel that, it was almost as if I also had access to this vast, space behind me, like being in a quiet cave that's right behind a swiftly moving waterfall. And I was experiencing both of these fairly fully. And so I would sometimes I would catch myself saying things, that just being very angry or punching a door or a wall or something like that with a lot of force. And yet at the same time, there wasn't any sort of ego stickiness with it. There was no self-judgment. There was no kind of watching of what was going on. It was just moving very, very freely, and there was a sense that it wasn't, that wasn't the totality of me doing that. There was a sense that who I was no longer bound to that little, sort of ego that I'd been building up all those years, but was somehow moored in something else or not moored at all. So that was very interesting. I was noting that because it was new, and I hadn't, I'd maybe had glimpses of that as a child, but not as sort of a halfway to adulthood person at that time.
Definitely a profound change, and subsequently after that, or a couple of years after that, you took up meditation.
Yes.
The ascension meditation.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I'm feeling so relaxed talking to you at the moment. I'm in a meditative state as we speak.
Oh, good.
You're so calm and relaxed.
Yeah, I guess it had to happen. I think I rather slow walked it, funnily enough. I knew I had to, actually, I don't know when I knew I had to meditate, certainly I watched the film, The Little Buddha, at age 13 or 14. And I guess Keanu Reeves' Buddha was a very convincing, figure.
Sure.
But I'd walked into a metaphysical bookstore with my sister, actually, and I'd never had that inclination to go in a metaphysical bookstore before. It seemed like, oh, that's not the stuff I'm interested in. I don't even know what that shop's about. I'm not going to go in there. But I tagged along, and I'm glad that I did, following my big sister along as I always did. And I opened up this book on sort of the meditation experiences of Himalayan yogis, and I started browsing, and the first page was describing things that sounded like what I had experienced. And up until that time, I was actually trying to get back to it. I was doing all sorts of weird, crazy stuff, and like jumping out of moving golf carts, getting them up to 20 miles per hour and jumping out of them, jumping down from heights that were scary, trying to scare myself into the sense that I might be dying soon. I thought that was the trigger to get me back to that state. When it faded, I had to get back there, and that wasn't working. And when I almost broke my arm doing that, I was like, okay, we're gonna have to put the kibosh on those strategies, because that's a little sketchy. Try something else. I just didn't know anything else was available. And so I'm glad I later went into that metaphysical bookstore, because that's a way. There's a way to get back to that. And so instead of like jumping into a meditation practice right away, because not many were available in small town Wisconsin in those days, I just furiously read as many of the books in that metaphysical bookstore and across the street at the public library that I could, and kind of built up sort of a higgledy-piggledy practice. And for about 3 years, I was also at the same time trying to be, I suppose I was trying to be a normal person at the same time and pick up the pieces of my old life. And unfortunately, maybe fortunately, it was rather unconvincing. So
I question more and more what is normal. It's a very hard word to define.
Exactly. It's really, not much there. I mean, for the most part. So I mean, for me, it was I had this crazy, I called it the crazy monk inside me. And, I was trying to, both for myself and maybe even more for my family, I was trying to heed everybody's advice and do what seemed like the logical, rational way of running one's life, kind of the safe way. And I could see I didn't have anybody repressing my spirituality so much. Everyone was really looking out for me. And then but it just became apparent that, no, I have to do this. I have to, that this enlightenment thing is real, that they're talking about, that there are deeper experiences that are naturally available to all human beings, and also that my life had been structured in such a way that I really gave myself a very big wake-up call. That also had to involve the loss of my mother, and so that I also kind of felt not a bad responsibility, not a weight, but kind of a sense that this was planned, and you come on, you gotta make it worthwhile. You gotta take advantage of this.
Like your soul was calling you. You really had no choice. It was you were compelled. I get it.
Yeah. And so that it was an awkward in-between phase, I guess, it is for many people in different ways. My high school years until the last year, when I decided beforehand to really dedicate myself to meditation and spiritual practices and just go hard, even though the techniques I was using weren't that great at the time. I think there's that Chinese Taoist proverb, the right person with the wrong means will still make it, or something like that. Right. So I decided to just, like a Scorpio, dive in, 200%, and became an ascetic for a while, basically taking cold showers at 3 a.m. and doing all these concentration practice and getting in 5 to 6 hours of meditation every day.
Wow, that's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it was
5 to 6 hours. And you were still at school at this time?
Yeah.
There's worse vices than 5 to 6 hours of meditation.
That's what I told people. That's what I say. Hey, I could be drinking a 12-pack a day here and smoking. What's the complaints here? Come on.
It is extreme, though.
It is extreme. Years later, I found out that I'd been put on suicide watch at my high school. And I look back and said, I can see why they think that, because I also wanted to get rid of a lot of possessions. I wanted to be this, I pared myself down to 3 books at a certain point. And I wanted to be able to put everything into a camping backpack and roam the world as a free spiritual seeker. And so I was giving away all these treasured presents to people. And years later, that's a warning sign. But and I was there was an emotionally turbulent time because I was such a perfectionist as well. And if I had this little book where if I committed some kind of I suppose you call it a sin, not really a sin, but if I screwed up in some way, egoically, I would put a mark in it. And oh my God, I'm glad that I got that out of my system because that harshness, because it made me ready for an effortless path, an effortless meditation, which is what I found in the Ishaya's ascension practice.
Amazing. I'm just like, obviously I'm not a psychologist, but I also have the feeling that in some way that you wanted to make your mother's death meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That absolutely. That was certainly there. That was part of the motivation. It was like, yeah, if if you're gonna lose your mother, then you might as well, make her sacrifice worthwhile. I knew that wasn't necessarily, I didn't necessarily reify that statement all the way, but it was there. It was there.
Yeah.
As a motivational thing, and the fact that I kind of had the sense of it happening before it did, in the morning, that actually took a lot of the load off, because I could have seen myself blaming myself. I wasn't good enough. I should have seen the car coming or something like that, or
Yeah.
I could have done something. I'd never really had that as a burden on me. For some reason, the sense of it, there being at least some, it being scripted or something like that was there. And I don't necessarily think everything is scripted, but I'm not all in the free will camp either. I think it's a different thing, but that's a digression.
Oh, no, I love this conversation.
So,
I think the past,
yeah.
present, and future is already planned. I love this.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I've come to what people could say I'm a cop-out answer where I'll say, like, yeah, the human conception of determinism and free will are actually just are both poor. They're not big enough nets to adequately grasp what's really happening, which I think is both and. So yeah.
Yeah. Long conversation.
That's a long conversation. We'd have to tease things out. Yeah.
But if you've had your near-death experience, you must in some way think that this must have been planned. The car accident, your experience, your mother's death. Not that it necessarily makes the suffering easier in your humanness, but in some way our life trajectory, I think the major points are planned. We can still then the question is it free will, and do we choose? Anyway, long conversation. I'm digressing to your ascension meditation.
Sometimes it comes to who's doing the choosing, and I think often the who is the most important part, or where we're coming from, because we often are coming from this sort of this limited, boxed-in space of thinking ourselves the wave and separate from this ocean, or not even thinking there's an ocean there. But like with meditation or an NDE, or however it happens, if we fall into the whole ocean, if we fall into the level of ourself, which is the all, then that's a very, language and grammar change quite a bit. And then, yeah, free will and determinism, same, because if you're the whole ocean, you're the thing that's moving the whole game anyhow. You're the totality. There's no chance for causality even at that level, because there's nothing to cause and nothing to be affected. So yeah, all our whole linguistic structures break down there and have to be amended. That's something that I've always had fun with.
That's very interesting. So how would you say you walk the path of life if there's no causality? It's
both. I think there's this. We still exist in these little wave bodies. We still remember which body we're in. There's still a sense of separateness, but it doesn't have to be the total thing. And in Sanskrit, they'll call it the lesha vidya, which is a term which means the last remains of ignorance. And they'll say that even say like an enlightened sage who's been bathing themselves in this non-local consciousness and has a sense of a very corporeal even sense of being, of kind of being in everything and everyone. They still have to have something which allows them to kind of brush their teeth and drive a car and say yes and no and get along, and that's the Leisha Vidya. So I think that we get to partake in both. Uh, you know,
Because in some way we have chosen to come back into our into a physical form and to
yeah,
have this experience. Why
yeah, and
why do
there's
we come back? Why do we come back, in your opinion?
oh, that's one of the one. Well, I mean, I won't do Hinduism 101, which is often, but it kind of comes out that way. I think it's all a wonderful play. And that's my feeling of the why, which isn't necessarily much of a why to some people. It doesn't sound like a great answer,
Yeah, it's a
but
great answer.
there's a sense of this is um, this is a beautiful play. That this play of God that allows the infinite. Here's some Hinduism 101 or Neil Donald Walsh 101.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful play that allows the infinite to experience it itself through the illusion of separation. And there's nothing wrong with the illusion too. It's like some people get into this kind of get a little bit depressed and they get this mind, body, spirit, matter duality. I just don't have any of that. It seems like just this wonderful continuum of the same thing to me. That the physical is just a denser version of pure consciousness itself, and so there doesn't the body has never seemed like some kind of fleshy prison to me, like the old Gnostics or Manichaeans would think. There's never been that harsh sense of duality or sense of you have to break out of this somehow. And for me, spirituality has almost been more of I had the effect of actually putting me in my body more. So my meditation, which is called ascension, for me, I might as well call it descension, because that's the effect it had. Is I could finally, feel my feet a little better with more acuity.
How interesting. So when you talk about everything and the complete consciousness, do you think, in your belief, obviously there's interviews about you, do we have a soul, or are we all the one consciousness? Do we have individual souls? We have both.
I think so. I mean, I think of it like a holograph. I mean, in a certain sense, not in the most technical sense, but by analogy, I think that basically we're like one big blanket. That if you crinkle that blanket up enough, we start to think of we can have the ability to think of ourselves as these little ridges, individuals, or like a hand. We are the whole hand, but we get habituated to thinking that we're here, and when from this point it looks like there's a world of separate finger people, and if we simply could, meditation is simply a wonderful means of systematically relaxing back down to the level of the palm. And the more time we stay down there, we start to get a sense of, okay, you don't lose the sense of being a thumb. It just is no longer the 90% identification. It becomes more like the 10% identification, and it becomes integrated within a much richer, much larger, more expansive sense of being. And then we, at a certain point, we start to even rise up a little bit into the other fingers. And that to me is what the sense of oneness really is. It's this very subtle but profound relaxation. And in that relaxation, there's the sense of I and thou becomes just much, much thinner.
Which is what you teach in your ascension meditation, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear a bit more about that, and how can we reach that sort of level through practice?
Well, yeah. So like the ascension practice is kind of an effortless mantra type of practice. Only in this case, the mantras aren't primarily in Sanskrit. They're in the first language of whoever is doing the practice. And so I find them to be like, I often call them prayer mantras. I have a friend who calls them magic mantra thingies, and that actually might be maybe the most endearing and accurate way of framing them in some ways. And so they're these little short phrases that incorporate appreciation, gratitude, and love into their structure. And we don't have to feel these things, because actually we don't have to do anything at all artificial in the practice, which is nice because, some days you just feel like crap, and that's okay. That's part of, I think, meditation, spirituality is really becoming okay with everything that's
Sure.
that's down in there. But there's some quality about these that I think also, in my experience, like Sanskrit mantras, there's a quality about these that has this tendency of taking the mind from wherever the surface happens to be and moving it back towards its source. And so it's this, as the mind moves back and kind of touches the source, there's this profound relaxation that's also in the body. And with that relaxation, there's a lot of tension that just starts to get thrown off, and tensions that, again, like the NDE revealed, tensions that we didn't even know we were carrying around with.
Yes, so
And
it's
so,
an awareness as well, isn't it? So just stop. So, we lead such busy lives, and just to stop sometimes and listen to our heart, or smell the roses, basically with your eyes closed while you're meditating, just to be.
yes.
And to control that egoic mind. Don't let it control.
And the wonderful ways that, exactly, in this way, I like that you mentioned that. It's a good segue, because the wonderful things here is that I was raised up initially in the meditation, thinking that I needed to control the mind, or that developing a mental discipline was very good, a good sort of thing. And in some ways it is. But I found with this practice, instead of trying to chain the monkey mind, we're actually feeding it bananas. And that by
through the mantra.
And so we're kind of charming it, and it goes along with the practice. And so I realized, that it's a monkey mind to a certain extent is true, but more true is that the mind is actually searching for the transcendent experience. It just needs a little help in getting back there. And it's like, when on a lesser level, I suppose, if you like Led Zeppelin quite a bit, you don't have to, when you're listening to it, most people don't have to say, no, don't deviate from the Led Zeppelin song. Keep focused on, get back. Most people, when they're listening to music they have no problem paying attention. I think that the music that the mind likes the most is the music of presence, is the music of that peak experience, as Maslow was referring to it. I think people love being in flow. I think more than anything, people love being in flow. And so this is just a way of tuning people back into what is, I think, the most natural style of functioning for the human being.
How wonderful. And like anything, it's nothing's instantaneous. Well, this is a lifelong practice, this coming back to who we are.
Yeah.
I've found, it's always ebbs and flows of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So are you meditating for 5 hours a day still?
Not formally, not in the way I was doing before.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk to the Passion Harvest audience about?
Well, I maybe I've been saying this a lot lately, but this has been a theme of my life. But don't wait. If you have love in your heart that you've bottled up, don't wait to share it. At any moment can be the last moment. And there's something beautiful, and there's something that takes the load off when we stop putting off certain things, when we give ourselves the gift of letting out the authentic, when we don't leave anything on the table, and that's something that I guess I feel like sharing.
Oh, thank you. That was such a beautiful message. I love it. Speak your truth. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Ishtar, Howell, thank you so much for being on Passion Harvest. Thank you for speaking honestly and openly, and your journey and experience of life. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you very much, Louise.
Okay, bye for now. If you like this episode, please do subscribe for weekly passionate inspirational interviews.